It's a good price.
Good.
It's low mileage.
They were very straightforward about the lowest price and
No haggling, no hassle type thing. I'm all for that.
How did we do on your trade-in value?
Really well. I was hoping for half of what I got for it.
I got, over what I was thinking I was going to get for it.
We'll be back ourselves. Even if we don't live in the area, we'll figure out a way.
Usually keep pretty good watch over them. Yeah, here you go. You know who you are, who am I?
Right there, Charles.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Ultimately, the purpose of our meeting today is most importantly hear from these local officials and anybody else that have any questions. I want to make a few comments and call on Chris for a second, then I want to make sure that all of the local leaders have an opportunity to talk with us today. On Wednesday of this week, I vetoed 10 bills passed in the final hours of the legislative session that included more than a dozen special breaks for a wide variety of special interests. Fast food restaurants, power companies, personal seat licenses at stadiums, commercial dry cleaners, just to name a few. Just hours later, members of the General Assembly indicated that they intended to continue to move forward in these policy areas. This is really serious stuff because while these provisions would benefit only a select few groups, the fiscal impact would be significant and immediate and broad. The Office of Budget and Planning Analysis found that the grab bag of giveaways would reduce state and local revenues by $776 million annually. That's $425 million annually from the state budget and $351 million each year from local budgets. It's important to note that not a penny of these costs was accounted for in the budget that the legislature passed just a week earlier or in the budgets of any local entities that are negatively affected. If these bills became law, these provisions would begin reducing revenues as soon as they became in effect, which would be later this year. With no guarantees that my vetoes will be sustained, these fiscally irresponsible handouts would have to be accounted for, obviously tough choices. Now, on the state level, I have to have the budget done by, our fiscal year starts July 1, so we're literally in the process of getting that finalized. And there are going to be tough decisions and significant cuts, but that's my responsibility, not why I'm here to talk about what I will be working on tonight when I get back to the Capitol. But more importantly for why we're here today, these provisions are going to force tough decisions in local communities. Most of these special breaks are sales tax exemptions, which means that in addition to reducing state general revenue, they also reduce funding for local jurisdictions like cities and counties, fire protection and ambulance districts. Just to give you a quick governmental thing, we have about 90 types of local government sales tax entities: library boards, park boards, mental health boards, road districts, fire districts, all that sort of stuff, 911 districts all over the state. And that doesn't even count a county sales tax for general purposes or a city one. Ambulance, emergency services, all of that sort of stuff. In some of the areas of our state also, the sales tax has been used to finance capital improvements, like county jails, hospitals, road projects and whatnot. That's really important for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you have a dramatic drop in that income line, you can't complete those projects on a timely fashion. And for folks in that line of work, if you promise you're going to build somebody a road and it's not built, they tend to come back and tell you that relatively in very clear terms, shall we say. But also in some of these, bonds have been to get bonded, and anything that affects that credit rating out there makes any of those bonding things more difficult and more challenging in the future. Now, at a local level, during 2009-2010, anybody that had sales tax revenue, any entity, learned a lot about cutting budgets. Okay, when the economy went down in 9 and 10, one of the first places we saw it in our state was in sales tax budgets. So I don't need to tell any of these people that sit at this table or any officials out here what it's like to cut budgets. You've done it. 2009, 2010, it's happened. We also know that sales tax revenue has trailed behind economic indicators for a lot of complicated reasons, but nonetheless, the economy's moving forward, unemployment's going down, sales tax revenues are not moving up at that same space. A lot of folks are moving to the internet, other things out there. But to hit this at that point, after you've made those checks of 9 and 10, at a time in which it's not seeing the growth relative to the rest of the economy, that's a real and serious issue. Now, at the local level, you got a lot of hard work to do, and you don't need folks in Jeff City making your jobs harder. And when the legislature in the last 8 hours passes bills that take $351 million out of the budgets, the vast majority of which local voters have approved, I should note, then it becomes a problem. Now, as I get down here, and we'll open up to listen here. There's a reason that communities like this one didn't have a chance to weigh in and make your voices heard about the devastating impact of these bills before senators and representatives. And that reason is, in their rush to pass these deals, the General Assembly disregarded its normal legislative process. You didn't miss the hearings, they didn't have them. You didn't miss the fiscal note, they didn't make it. This was literally on the last day of the session. The vast majority of these were just amendments added to bills right at the end and rushed through the legislature. So most of these costly provisions were slipped into these bills without a public hearing, without a fiscal estimate of their costs. So legislators had no idea about the consequences. Now, for you folks at the city level, if anybody says to you, any of these folks say, wow, there's no way we can exempt cities or exempt counties or exempt these districts on this stuff if we're going to give some sort of exemption to some company or industry or special interest, as if the utility company needs a $20 million tax break. I'm assuming because of that they'll not send you all utility bills this month. But anyway, it's just very, very important that we understand these local. I could go on too long. I'm going to turn it over to Chris for a second because they don't want to listen to folks. I can go on. Talking is something I get up in the morning doing early in the day, and it doesn't appear to tire me, so I can go at some length. But I'm going to turn to Chris real quick and touch any of the top lines of this, and I want to hear how these things would affect folks here.
Thank you, Governor. As the Governor indicated, I work in the Governor's office. I'm responsible for doing all the reviews of all this legislation that's passed, and in particular, we've been working very hard on reviewing these 10 pieces of legislation the Governor vetoed early this week. The review was made all the more difficult because, as the Governor mentioned, there weren't hearings, public hearings on many of the provisions in these bills. There weren't the usual kind of fiscal analysis that the legislature is required to do so that senators and representatives know what they're voting on. And so we've been working very hard over the past 7 to 10 days to really get a handle on how this would affect the state budget as well as local budgets. Just as a kind of a quick overview of the various exemptions that were put into these bills, the legislature it slipped in an exemption, as the Governor mentioned, for power companies. All of the purchases that a power company makes in transmitting or distributing electricity, so the poles and the wires and everything they buy would be tax exempt under one of these under one of these 10 bills. There's also a provision in the bills that would exempt all the electricity purchased by fast food restaurants, convenience stores, and others. That's the bill that the Governor referred to that actually doesn't apply to the local tax. So to the Governor's point, there are situations where the legislature did have public hearings on some of these provisions, and they did say that after hearing from local communities that we shouldn't apply that to the local tax, and that
yes, the point is, if they said they can't do it, they did right there. What happened was that was a bill that was noticed up. Missouri Municipal League, Missouri Associated Counties testified and said, don't do that to us. We have commitments out there, and they put the amendment to clean up on it. They didn't do that on any of the other bills, but it just shows you that they have the ability, when they do legislation, to not affect the local side of any of these taxes.
Another very significant provision for local communities that was inserted into into these bills. There's a new tax exemption, an exemption from state and local sales tax that would apply to any business that has data processing or storage, or does data processing or storage. Some people in the press have gotten this a little, I think, conflated with some earlier legislation that was in the General Assembly that would have provided an incentive for data centers, these large facilities that that are for storing data. What was actually inserted into this bill was something broader than that, that says basically if you're a business that does anything with a computer or anything where you're storing any data, you might be eligible for a new sales tax exemption. That is estimated to hit local governments by about $152 million annually, as well as a $126 million state impact. Other provisions in these bills, and as you know, as the governor mentioned, there's 10 of them. They're these omnibus kind of bills that sort of get Christmas treed up at the end of session. So I won't bore you with all the gory details, but the ones that do affect you all. There's a provision in the bill that says that for the first time, a business that's trying to use one of these sales tax exemptions, that they don't have to actually prove that they're eligible for the exemption anymore. I know that anybody that deals with sales taxes, you know, you got to have that exemption certificate that says I'm exempt. Well, there's a new provision here that says if you're a business and you're trying to take an exemption, you no longer have to prove it. That's a big change in the law. It's going to make for a lot of litigation, a lot of disagreement over what taxes are due or not, and ultimately it's going to expand the cost of these provisions quite significantly.
So our goal here is, and we've done a lot of talking, we want to listen to about how these dramatic shifts would affect services and the availability of services and issues that you might have local level. We'll start off with Mayor. Thanks for having us in your town. I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you, Governor. As I said earlier, and in our letters of support to you to veto, which you have done, by all our elected officials and representatives of the city council, likewise with the county commission. Services we provide are big in cities and counties our size, larger and smaller. To the figures that we had that were tabulated by Missouri Municipal League, correct me if I'm wrong, auditor, that we used, it's going to take about plus a half a million hit to us, 536,000 to be exact, I think. And she may have more to describe on that, but the services that we provide and the dedicated tax.
That's every year too.
Right, correct.
Yeah,
and the dedicated services that we provide, we just built a new water park 2 years ago, and it was just like you said earlier. It was done by the authority of the people of the city of Chillicothe in approving another tax. And we've done that on several things in the last few years, including our fire station, police department, hospital. So will this be a hit? I'm not sure with the decline in sales tax numbers, and again, our auditor could may address those, besides the fact that we're taking a hit on this, and they do have and can, I mean, it's very important that each one of us, as was mentioned, contact our state representative and state senator, because they've showed that they've already said they're going to go after the vetoes, correct?
I mean, I haven't talked to each one of them personally, but some of the leadership guys have certainly said that.
Well, at least that's what you read. So, I mean, this is huge for every city and county in the state of Missouri. It's huge for the state of Missouri, and we have an obligation to the people of our state and to the people of our communities. So, I'll guarantee you, we're going to be working hard, and the commissioner may want to comment something on a meeting that we attended with the state senator, a round table, and state representative, and the answers that we got. So the figures coming from Missouri Municipal League, I have to assume are right. They're on top of this, correct? And again, they may have more to address other city people, but we have some of our representatives here. Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Thanks for coming to Chillicothe and talking to us about this. We greatly appreciate it. We did send a contact letter to the governor back at the end of May and encouraging the governor to veto these bills, and he did, and we're very much appreciative of you doing that. The county of Livingston County, our main source of income is two. It's a 1/2-cent sales tax for our general revenue and a 1/4-cent sales tax for our law enforcement. That is our main source of income to run our whole county. And when you're going to cut that by approximately $190,000, there's going to have to be cuts next year. And you know, it's not going to be pretty. I've been a commissioner for 18 years now, and it hasn't been easy the whole 18 years I've been there. So when you take $190,000 away from us this year, and probably it will continue to get worse, it won't get any better, I'm sure. So it will really be a problem for us. So what I would really like to encourage is all of you people that are here today, all of your friends, all of your relatives that you can get hold of, you need to contact our rep, Mike Laird, and our senator, David Pierce, and any other senator or representative that you know, and talk to them about this and tell what this is going to do to Chillicothe and to Livingston County. It's obviously they don't know it, or they surely wouldn't have never been in favor of this thing. You know, so I encourage all of you to really, and I think us as elected officials, if we have to have some meetings and have forums and have public come and give them sample letters to look at, and maybe even a sample letter that if they sign it and address it right there and send it to them. We got to get on a campaign, and I mean, we got to get on it right away, because this veto session is scheduled to begin on September the 10th. And they say they're going to override the governor's veto. If this happens, folks, Chillicothe and Livingston County has got a very serious problem. I just ask for your all support and really hope that you help us get this letter writing campaign started. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Teresa, everybody's calling you as
The only thing I'd like to say, I think they pretty well painted a picture for us, but I look out there and I see all the surrounding counties and cities, and I know it's going to be detrimental to your budgets as well. And so I think we, in this part of the state, need to join together and educate our people, call our congressmen, and get them to not override his vetoes.
One of the key, thank you very much. I mean, one of the things that the public really understands as a necessity for government is police and fire. I mean, I think that when people dial a phone number and say they're either need one of your services, it generally is not to have you come out to tell them about the weather. And so I'd be interested, and I know that in any inputs or thoughts that you might have, we'll start with Chief of Police Wood.
Well, I can tell you right now that in the past couple of years, we've had to cut our budget because of expenses. And it has had an effect on us as far as equipment and manpower. Recently, we lost one officer off of our department that we won't get back. And if this happens, I can see a lot more of that going on, where response time would slow down. The equipment would not be there. We live off of the sales tax. That's the police department. We, right now, we're proactive more than we are reactive. We're trying to find things that are going on and still take the calls. Well, eventually that will slow down. We'll be more reactive and just be taking the calls as they come in, which is really not a very good thing. It just makes the community a little bit less safe whenever you have to just do that.
On fire and
from our end, and what we're expected to do that service to answer the 911 calls. And so our costs continue to go up. Our fuel prices rise. Medical supplies go up about 7.5% a year every year. The cost of fire trucks go up. The cost of tires go up. And also during that time, our calls for service in our community has risen over the last several years. So our cost to operate continues to go up. And to do it with less money is just going to be devastating, as they've all said. And where those cuts come from, are you going to eliminate people? You know, we only have one fire station, so obviously we're not going to close that like Kansas City's going through closing stations. So it's definitely going to cost a reduction in services at some point. And where you're going to get that at, it's hard to tell. That's if it goes through come fall for next budget year as a city, and all we'll just have to sit down and figure out, you know, what do we do to keep the lights on? But everything we pay for goes up.
I appreciate that. I know there's a number of other officials here. If anybody has a question or comment, I'd certainly be open to that at any juncture here. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Dick King, Planning Commissioner, Lane County. I think you've covered about everything else. One thing I'd like to mention, I just voted in a 911, half-cent 911 sales tax to start our 911 system up. This is going to affect this thing, also the 911 system's tremendous. I mean, with this thing, plus, of course, my city's here. I got Brookfield, Marceline, and you know, went through all that, and I think Ken pretty well covered that. The only thing I mentioned was, wanted to mention also 911, anything with sales tax, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna really hurt, and we appreciate you, Governor, really doing this. We're gonna work together and try to get this thing where we can get it stopped, you know, legislation.
Thank you very much. I do think that the point you make, that's not the first time. This is, when we were down this morning in Carthage, I mean, they're trying to merge the 911 of a couple of areas down there, which is difficult, all the dispatching and all of that sort of stuff. But you also, in our state, I mean, this is the method, sales tax, that has been forced to be used by local folks on 911 because the cost structure as originally designed, saying that you would get a certain amount off of landline costs, they invented these things called the cell phones, and they may work. I mean, people may start using those things, but it's causing the financial structure of 911 not to work.
Our 911 system, we first put it in on the landline, we had to do something because the funding disappeared.
Yeah,
On our landline, so we did pass this half-cent sales tax, you know, and this is really gonna affect that, maybe a half-cent now if with this cut, you understand what I mean? Probably need 3/4 cent to run the thing.
Well, and especially when you see folks pushing towards more requirements of certification for folks that are answering the phone on 911, more training requirements for law enforcement and police that are out there responding. I've got a number of bills on my desk that have additional requirements for this kind of training or that kind of training, and rightfully so, those folks aren't free, and that training's not free either. Other comments or questions from anybody? Yes, sir.
I'm Curtis Shields, Fire Chief in Carrollton, on behalf of the fire and law enforcement here. I would just like to add, since September 11th, our duties have expanded greatly, and we've done great at a local level to try to keep pace with meeting all the obligations that we need to for our security and what's expected of us. So from that standpoint there, we're already squeezing. We're already trying to fulfill these obligations. So I mean, I can agree with what they're saying, and certainly, we need to fulfill our obligations.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, on these sales tax ones, especially law enforcement, I mean, that has been the method that law enforcement has been funded across the board. I agree with you. I think that the responsibilities in three areas, fire, police, have both increased. I also think schools. I mean, people will see schools as a place for a lot broader responsibility than they used to be. This would cut Prop C. That'd be $105 for every school child in the state would be gone. So you can multiply those numbers out. I'm going to conclude. If the press has questions, Channing, I'll answer them over here in just a second. Just to kind of finish where I started. As governor, when the legislative session ends, I mean, it's the first time in 27 years I've seen a legislature blow up a budget after they passed it. Okay, number one. And I think that a lot of folks, as you all indicated, didn't know exactly what they were doing in the last day there. Okay, so I'm not. Yeah, well, we certainly didn't. But that first night, when the governor I have press availability, all governors do, a half hour after the legislative session to answer questions. Our focus was on the state side of this, because, it was our budget and the state dollars, and it was about $480 million, and we were, looking at it. It wasn't until after that presser, and then we started thinking about it and looking at it, and the next morning, that weekend, that we began to look through all of these all of these local and county funds. And there's a bunch of them. And it's going to have, it will not have an equal effect on each community. It will have a more significant effect in counties that are both in cities that are relying on sales tax and areas where there's still a fair amount of commerce. But it's especially problematic in the more rural areas of the state, because the small towns and the counties provide the basis of services in those areas of fire and emergency and whatnot. So I would just follow up with these folks. I think educating the folks is important. Obviously, sustaining these vetoes is important. If these folks want to do this sort of stuff, then they should put a bill in, they should have hearings, and they should go through the process of doing it, and they should true it up into budgets. They did not do that here. This is not the way to run a government. And I'm hopeful that I think proper vetoes I made will be sustained. This is also the prettiest day we've had in a long time. It's Friday afternoon. I'm not gonna, I've talked a long time already, and it's gonna get hot tomorrow. The water park will be very filled. I would appreciate it tomorrow. This would appear to be the nicest day we're gonna have this year, so I'm gonna end what I got to say here and make sure that, while I have to go back to the Capitol and balance the budget, that somebody here get outside and do something outside over the next 2 hours before sunset that has some more joy than trying to grind through a budget in the Capitol with a bunch of folks on Friday night. Thank you very much for having us. We look forward to working with you over the summer to be as successful as I can.
Thank you, Governor.
We're gonna be working with you to get that.
Get one of these guys, Jeff, or worse. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm good.